The Jaipur BookMark reflects the core values of the publishing industry, and it brings together some of the greatest publishing professionals from around the world.
जयपुर बुकमार्क एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म है जहाँ पे कि बिजनेस को समझने का एक अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलता है. सो आई थिंक JBM इज़ समथिंग विच इज़ फैंटास्टिक एंड पीपल हु डोंट नो अबाउट इट, उनको आना चाहिए, उनको इसका हिस्सा बनना चाहिए.
Jaipur BookMark. Come and celebrate literature, meet authors, agents, publishers. Join us at the Jaipur BookMark.
On behalf of Jaipur BookMark Festival advisors Aditi Maheshwari Goyal, Namita Gokhale, Naveen Kishore, Neeta Gupta and Urvashi Butalia, festival producer Sanjoy Roy and all my colleagues at Team Book Arts, we welcome you to the 8th edition of the Jaipur BookMark. The Indian publishing industry has grown rapidly with the world's attention converging on it. Creating a meaningful B2B platform for publishers was thus essential, and the Jaipur BookMark was conceived to run parallel to the Jaipur Literature Festival. In the 7 years since its inception, JBM has fast emerged as a nerve center for the South Asian publishing industry and is indeed a focal point where books mean business. In 2020, the world grappled with the pandemic and businesses learned to reinvent themselves and adapt to an entirely new digital idiom. JBM 2021 is being held as a virtual event and, as always, continues to bring together all stakeholders of the business of books over meaningful discussions and far-reaching resolutions. A warm welcome to all of you to this session at the virtual Jaipur BookMark 2021. Extending the novel, fiction, non-fiction, translation. Adam Foulds, Kannan Sundaram, Meelis Friedenthal and Rodaan Al Galidi in conversation with Sambudha Sen, organized by Cultural Relations Platform, an EU-funded project in collaboration with the Jaipur BookMark. How is literature translated culturally? How does a novel, so precisely set in its context, travel to other contexts? How do authors negotiate the translation of their works? What is the perspective of the publisher when selling and buying translation rights? This session will delve deep into the ways in which translation is negotiated and the ways in which linguistic crossover takes place. Adam Foulds was born in London. He's the author of 4 novels and a book-length narrative poem. He has been the recipient of numerous literary awards, including the European Union Prize for Literature. Kannan Sundaram, the managing director and publisher of the Kalachuvadu Publication Private Limited. He has been part of the International Visitor Program to the United States in 2002, the Frankfurt Book Fair Fellowship Program in 2007, the Visiting International Publisher Program in Sydney in 2017, and the Istanbul Fellowship in 2020. He has published 6 Tamil books consisting of critical articles on Tamil media, publishing and politics. Kalachuvadu was awarded the Best Publisher Award by Publishing Next in 2018 and the Romain Roland Award for Best Translation from French to an Indian language. Meelis Friedenthal is active in both academia and literature. He has published novels, short stories and plays. In 2013, he won the European Union Prize for Literature. Rodaan Al Galidi. Netherlands-based Rodaan, a writer of Iraqi descent, studied to be an engineer in Iraq before fleeing to the Netherlands to escape military service in 1998. His request for asylum was first rejected, and since he was not allowed to train in an official Dutch language course, he taught himself the language and started writing. He is now considered a Dutch writer. In 2007, he was among those asylum seekers who were granted general pardon by the Dutch Parliament. Sambudha Sen is a senior professor of English at Shiv Nadar University. His essays on 19th century culture have been published in Representations, Victorian Studies, and English Literary History. His book, London Radical Culture and the Making of the Dickensian Aesthetic, was shortlisted by the publisher for the Navsa Prize, and a collection of essays on the early novel in India that he edited was brought out by Permanent Black. Sambudha, over to you.
Hello. It's a real privilege to be able to moderate this session. You've heard just how distinguished our panelists are. I just want to add one feature that I find absolutely irresistible about this panel, and it's this: that every person in this panel, the work of every person in this panel embodies that inherent tendency in literature to break borders, push at borders, even during a time when, as we all know, borders are hardening. So if you look at Adam Foulds' work, he has a book called The Quickening Maze, which is as English as English can be, but he's also written a long poem about the Mau Mau rebellion. Meelis Friedenthal's work, which I haven't actually read, I didn't have the good fortune to read in its entirety, but an excerpt that I read struck me. I might be completely wrong about this, Meelis, but as inflected by the work of the Argentinian writer Borges, Kannan Sundaram, the Tamil publisher, publishes novels from all over the world, Russian, Turkish, English, and Rodaan, most remarkably, an Iraqi refugee, found his way to Holland and writing now in the Dutch language. So that is really what sets the platform today, the capacity that literature has to sort of break these borders. And one of the ways in which it does this is, as we know, through translations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up 3 questions, one by one, of course, to all the speakers, and maybe they'll take a few minutes to respond to each of these. My first question really has to do with translations, and I think what I want to ask is this: that do you believe that the novel as a form has a global audience? Do you believe that your novel will acquire a new life in translation, or do you believe that, or do you fear that it will be mutilated by a process of uprooting? And maybe we could start with Adam, because The Quickening Maze is such an English novel. I mean, it's just so embedded in the seasons, in the flora of England, in figures who are quintessentially English. If you translate that into some other language, what do you think will happen? Do you look forward to it, or are you anxious about it, Adam?
I think both of those things. I believe that my book will take on a new life. It has enough particularity and energy in it to find a way to flourish in a new language, if sensitively, attentively translated. But I don't worry, because I think it's inevitable that things will be lost. And in a way, this brings me back to your first question about the global audience for novels, which clearly exists. I think it's true that there are some kinds of writing that translate more easily. And I think if you look at novelists like Haruki Murakami, Kazuo Ishiguro, Thomas Bernhardt, Carlo Knausgaard, for example, these are all writers who have translated incredibly successfully and been very well received in many countries. And I think part of how that is the case is that they write in a very lucid, elegant, discursive prose that doesn't have too much to do with the kind of poetic connotations of individual words, isn't so much embedded in the kind of etymology and the associative roots of a language, which makes, I think, writers like James Joyce or D.H. Lawrence harder to translate. Still very worthwhile translating, but it's a different and more difficult kind of enterprise. And I think for me, with The Quickening Maze, I was wanting to write a novel that is very, as you say, in the roots of English literature and English landscape and the English language. So I do think it would present a challenge.
Thanks, thank you very much. And maybe, Rodaan, what,
Yeah.
how I noticed that a lot of your work has been translated, but into European languages. How do you think it'll play out in, for example, in the language that is spoken and Arabic in Iraq?
I see always the translating of my books not as my book, but the book of the translator. It is if the book have the power to run away from my language to another language, is not my book anymore. Is the book of the another language and the book of the translator. Even I say always to the translators, please read the book as reader, but don't translate it, but write it as your book. And that gives me a lot of relaxing and that keep it very simple in my mind. Oh, this is my book, and he went to grow up again in another language. Maybe he will find his way. If he's strong enough or not, I don't care about that, to be honest.
Okay, yeah. And Meelis, how do you see it's just so deeply rooted in a European milieu, and going back to the 17th century. How do you see the prospects, as your book sort of starts moving around the world, out of Europe? Into other countries? South America, I would have thought would be a very interesting place for your work to be read. How do you see it?
Yes, first of all, thanks for inviting me here, and I'm actually very much agreeing with what Adam said about this how novels can talk to different audiences and what kind of language the novel has. It depends on the language, but I think that it depends also on the themes and topic of the novels. For example, historical fiction demands a bit different translation process as let's say, not historical or science fiction literature, because for historical fiction, you actually need to work together with translators, because when you use quotations, when you cite some really existing person, then they have to just find the sources. And for this process, it's in this sense a bit different, as Rodaan described, that he gives it free and translator can do whatever he or she wants. I think in the case of historical fiction is a bit different, because the author actually has some background knowledge of the book that the translator doesn't have. So in this sense, it will be different. But at the same time, I think that the good historical fiction is something that should actually give insight into the situation that let's say was in 17th century Estonia. I think this is probably something that lots of people don't know about, but through historical fiction we can just enter this historical space and see it with our own eyes. In this sense, I think that novels and fiction are indeed really good way of exploring different cultures, different mentalities, whether these are mentalities of today or mentalities of the past. So, when speaking of the novel as, let's say, a tool, and I think that this novel is a wonderful tool. It's in this sense maybe a better tool than movies or academic literature, because it delves deeper into the mentality and into the space, this intellectual space or cultural space, and opens it up much better. In my opinion. So yeah, I really do think that novel is and continues to have a wide audience, and it will remain as important as it has been. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, it really has been the most resilient among the literary genres. There is no doubt about it. I mean, if you take it historically, I mean, for sure. I mean, it has been easily the most resilient, and also the most widespread, widely disseminated. I completely agree. But you know, Kannan, I mean, you could bring another perspective on this whole problem, because you know, you've actually had the experience of publishing translations into Tamil, and then actually sort of observing how those have been received. I mean, you know, a Tamil translation from KP of, say, for example, Brothers Karamazov, you know, how have you, you know, I mean, could you tell us a little bit about how it's been received among a Tamil reading audience? Hello?
Okay, so I have been in the rights trade for over 15 years now, buying and selling rights. We buy translation rights, of course, but we also have made the effort to translate Tamil works into other international and Indian languages, and that has also worked to some certain extent. And I have had the chance to observe both how international works are received in Tamil, and also on how Tamil works are received in other languages. And I think that has brought out some very interesting things. That I have noticed that some works that might be seen as popular literature in the Europe, when translated, Tamil readers have seen it as, you know, more literary works. And when Tamil works travel to other languages, the way they are perceived it changes. You know, when you place a work in a different language, different cultural paradigm, they are received differently by different readers. And that is also very interesting. While we talk about loss of translation, I've also noticed that some works work equally well in translation. You know, when there is because of the nature of the work, the language and the culture of the work that works within the work, and also because of the capability of the translator. And also in some instances, works gain in translation. When a work is placed in a different cultural context, they shine more brightly. And I think it is those kind of works that tend to travel more into world languages.
Right. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. So maybe we can now get into a second set of questions, interrelated set of questions, really. You know, and maybe we'll just follow the same order if it's okay with all of you. You know, the thing is, you know, thanks to people like Kannan, you know, and other international publishers, the novel truly has become a global form. I mean, you know, and so it's very, very easy to read major novels, even as they are written in different languages. So the question I want to ask each of you is, do you read fiction? Obviously, I'm sure you do. I mean, fiction written by people who don't belong to your country or your culture, I can almost assume the answer is going to be yes. But the more important question is, have you been influenced by fiction of that kind? I was thinking, for example, that Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, even though it's coming out of Colombia and written in Spanish, had a truly global impact, not only in terms of the number of people who were reading it, but also in terms of the, what Meelis called the possibilities that it was opening up for the novel form. I mean, so we could we have a round, focusing on that, on writers outside your culture who have influenced your work, influenced your sense of what the novel can or cannot do. Yeah, so maybe with Adam, can we start with that? Adam, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sure we will all agree that as for kind of serious literary writers not to read widely among the languages, among works in translation, is just, it wouldn't occur to us. It's an absurdity. I mean, everyone at some point you read the Russians, and it would be inconceivable not to do that. And you think about it, the most sort of prodigious writers as influences, you've mentioned one, Garcia Marquez. You could think that through the 20th century as being maybe Chekhov, Joyce, Kafka, Borges, Proust. They're all from different languages, and they've all had an absolutely kind of crucial, irrigating influence on people all around the world. So clearly, this argues that there's something very robustly permanent in that work that survives and repeats in translation. I think we know what we're talking about when we talk about the Kafkaesque or the Borgesian, and we know what that means and does for writers. In my own personal case, actually, it was a novel in translation originally that turned me into a novelist. I had written only poetry in my kind of teenage years, and it was late in my teens that I read Madame Bovary for the first time, and absolutely a locus classicus of the modern novel in one of its most achieved forms, and it was really that book that influenced me as it's influenced so many other people. In my case, in particular, it was seeing that a novel could be as exquisitely put together, as controlled and as rhythmical as a piece of poetry, that the whole novel is essentially one long poem, and that it was never slack, it was never boring. I often, as a poet, I liked intensities of language and fierce experience, and sometimes I found novels that I read slack and uninteresting for short periods. Madame Bovary was never that, and encountering this kind of perfect composition in prose that was also musical and lyrical really made me think of the novel as a truly exciting form.
That's wonderful, Adam, because, I'd like to say it out loud, that your novel has that quality too. I mean, The Quickening Maze, page after page of nature description, and yet exquisite, riveting. You just want to read on, and I can see how much of Flaubert, that's the thing. I mean, once you get those horizons and you know that it's possible, you want to do it yourself. I mean, so wow. And Rodaan, I mean, what about you? I mean,
once I was in the airport in Amsterdam, and it was a book coming from from the Dalai Lama, and it was in several languages. The book was new in the market. The English translating was the Dalai Lama laughing in the cover of the book. The German was quiet, the Spanish smiling, the Dutch every language has kind of door, special special soul, a special place to take the book to that language. I read War and Peace in Iraq, and Karamazov Brothers also I read it in Iraq. The War and Peace, I understand it exactly in the same minute because I read it in the war between Iraq and Iran. And the war outside, I didn't understand the war around me, but the war in the book. And I began to be scared from the war around me because of the war in the book. But when I read Karamazov Brothers, I didn't understand why Ivan thinking all the time, why Dimitri angry, why Misha very believing in God. But when I come to Holland and the people thinking all the time, I like Karamazov Brothers more than the War and the Peace. I think every book, it doesn't matter which language, he need his minute to grow up. Same the trees, every season you have another flowers, and it doesn't matter of the translating good or not. Once when Dostoevsky was in Siberia in the jail, he sent a letter to his brother. He said, please send me very cheap book with very bad translating because he didn't have money. He said, I will understand the bad translating because it will make me good understanding and good thinking. And I do believe that every book in the history, he will find his reader. The reader, he don't need to look to the book. The book, he will arrive to the reader in his good minutes, and he will meet the book, and that I believe it. Because in the village in Iraq, I am coming from Najaf, and Dante Alighieri, he led the Holy Prophet Muhammad in the hill in Canto 28, and it was not allowed, not easy to find the hill of Dante Alighieri because the people don't like the book. And the book, he arrived to me in his minute, exactly when I go away from Iraq and I felt, my God, it is the hell, and I find the book. I believe in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if there is anything, in this world that has any chance of perpetuating, I mean, it is the written word, I mean, without any doubt. Meelis, what about you? I mean, books from cultures outside of your own that may have shown you a horizon thing to emulate.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that one of the things is that Estonian culture is very much a translation-based culture, because as our literary culture is only some 200 years old, and it has sort of grown from Baltic German culture. So the Estonian written world is quite young. And it means that we have sort of grown in the manure of other cultures, primarily German-speaking cultures. So translation has been always really important. And as also today, I think that as Estonian literary space is maybe not so big, as Estonia as a country is not so big. It means that we have lots and lots of translated works, of course, published in Estonian. And this makes it, I think, quite a unique experience, because there are, I think, more translated works on book market here than books written originally in Estonia, which means that every Estonian is, in this sense, also sort of world citizen, and it's not only so that the focus is not only English speaking world, but also German, Italian, and so on. So I remember quite well when I first read Marquez. So it was a just a wonderful experience. But at that time, actually, I didn't pay any attention what kind of writer he is. It's just I took a book and read that, and only later I found out, okay, this is not a local writer. But at that time, as a very young person, I didn't pay any attention to that. So yeah, in a sense, I think that these different languages are comparable to the idea of biodiversity, so that you should have many languages, many influences, as you should have biodiversity in nature. So this gives it a more dense, richer, and more healthy this experience. And I think this monocultural environments tend to die out. So yeah, we really need as this kind of help against this cultural dying out the many languages.
Absolutely. And Meelis, if I might ask you, I mean, has there been a writer who's influenced you particularly, who's shown you, what is possible? I mean,
yes, of course. You mentioned Borges before, and indeed, Borges has been.
Did I get that right? Wow, very nice.
that was absolutely correct. Borges has been a great influence for me, and I think that. So I have now also studied more why and how he wrote his books and short stories. So and this has become more and more sort of an influence for me, because the language and the strive for clarity, in a way, just describing things that are extended from our normal experience, but the language is something that carries it clearly and understandably. So this is something that I strive towards.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Kannan, I wanted to ask you, I mean, again, you can bring to this discussion a perspective nobody else has. I mean, and the question that I want to ask you is, I looked at your list. It's a remarkable list, absolutely remarkable in terms of your choice of people you've translated. It's not a simple canonical writers list. You've picked on Pamuk, Dostoevsky. You've picked a single novel of Dostoevsky. You've looked at Banfield. It's a very interesting list. And the question that kept sort of occurring to me is, what is it that determined your choices? Because it's clear to me that there was a very real logic. I mean, there was something that attracted you, and what was it? What is it that determines your choice of who you're going to translate?
Okay. When it comes to translations, I see Tamil as a culture that is open to ideas and literature from all across the world, and it has been that way for over 2,000 years of our writings now, and that of course has an influence on what we do today. So the great epic poems of Ramayana have been recreated in Tamil, and grammar and literary theories from Sanskrit have been have been absorbed, and they have influenced the formation of our own grammar, which was written 2,000 years ago, and also literary theories that have also come out of that grammar. So it's a culture that, while it believes deeply in retaining its own identity very strongly, it is also open to cultural winds from all directions. And that is one major aspect. When it comes to modern writing, Tamil readers have been reading translations from other Indian languages like Bangla and the European languages, Japanese, for nearly more than 100 years now, and they are very open to those translations. They don't see writing on the basis of whether the writer is Tamil or from another language. They only go for the book and the joy of reading that book. Another major thing is that, in Tamil, before we started publishing, works from, let's say, French and English and German and Spanish have already been translated, and Russian, a lot of Russian book, of course. But when we came, while we also translated from those languages, we decided to focus on languages that had never been translated to Tamil before, like Turkish, Catalan, Norwegian, and Flemish, Finnish, Icelandic. So we sort of looking out for new languages that have never come into Tamil before, and we made an effort to translate those languages. And Tamil readers, when it comes to, let's say, Marquez, Albert Camus, Orhan Pamuk, Dostoevsky, they don't see them as another language writer. They have owned them up as their own writers, and they don't read them differently. They enjoy their writing so much, and they discuss those writings, and they don't see them as alien writers who are coming to Tamil, but their own literary authors. So that is what I think that is the root of things. I think we strongly feel that to enrich our literature and our language, we have to bring writings from all over the world, from other Indian languages and from the European languages, also from the Asian languages. And that has been the core nature of our project.
Okay, that's fantastic, and at the same time, of course, you have published, you've published the great Tamil writers as well.
Yes.
I mean, that has, Ambai and Perumal.
Murugan, and we have made a lot of effort to take those writers to world languages, and we have been quite successful in that. And we have translated our writings into English and into German, French, Catalan, Chinese, Korean, and we continue those efforts. It is not easy, but we have been at it for the last 15 years. And we are quite happy with the results. I think we have sort of broken the glass ceiling to translate from Indian languages to the world. And we have managed to take about half a dozen writers into other languages.
And Kannan, how do they sell? I mean, say Ambai in Korean, or any example. Have you had a success? I mean, actual success in an Asian language. I mean, a Tamil work that you translated into Korean or Japanese, and then it sort of sold well in Japan. I mean, have you had anything like that?
I think what we have seen so far is moderate success, not probably bestsellers.
Okay.
But we see that increasingly that Perumal Murugan is selling quite well English internationally.
Okay.
And we are waiting to see how his works are received in other languages, because the breakthrough I'm talking about has happened only in the last 3, 4 years, 5 years.
Okay.
After we have been working at it for 15 years now, but the breakthrough happened only in the last 4, 5 years. So this work in progress, and we are not yet seen the full results. But I think they have not been failures, and we have been very careful in working with the publishers to select the right works that will travel internationally. Not necessarily what we consider as the best work of our language, but those works that might translate well into other languages. And that is the core nature of our effort, that those need to go first, and probably later on we can sell the modern classics and all that. So I think, they are considering that this is a totally different culture that is going into the world. I think the success has been quite modern and encouraging, because we are continuing to sell. That means, the results are not bad, and it's quite encouraging.
Yeah, fantastic.
Because Murugan has been quite a success in the US.
Fantastic, yeah, of course. I mean, I think that there's such a lovely resonance that just between what you're saying right now and what Adam was saying a little earlier. I mean, that there is, in fact, distinction to be made between, say, inherent literary excellence and a kind of literariness that translates well. That there is that distinction, and so a brilliantly translated work from Tamil need not be the best there is in Tamil, and so to that extent, it's very, very important, in order to access a literature of a culture, to in some way know that language. I mean, so that that's always the danger that translation, especially into English, carries. It's the danger of erasing of these very rich languages that survive all over the world. So yeah, I completely see that. Thanks. I mean, this is becoming a very, for me anyway, a very interesting discussion. Almost, I'd say, and like being in among your own. I mean, it's just so nice to be able to talk about things literally that are just so important, but that don't, in that sense, have a palpable value. It can't be exchanged for money, and therefore often relegated to the realm of pleasure and entertainment, as though what Meelis was saying is not true, that the novel in many ways is the best, that the novel is knowledge in a very, very fundamental sense. I mean, to lose out on the novel is to lose out on literature, is to lose out on real knowledge. And maybe then we could have a last round of discussion. I couldn't resist this, frankly. I mean, being amidst three novelists and a publisher who is utterly familiar with the great novels of this world, to ask you, what is it that makes a great novel? What is it that makes a great novel? And do you I mean, would you stick your neck out and say, these are great novelists? I would. I'll say it out loud. If I had to think of three of the greatest novelists I've ever read, ever, I mean, upright until now, it would be Dostoevsky, Marquez, and Melville, and if I had to add three more, I'd add Stendhal and Borges and Flaubert, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'd like you, each one of you, to speak about what makes a novel great, and if you could get into a little bit of specific discussion on some great novels, it really would become very animating. And maybe we'll just keep the same order. And Adam, would you like to go first?
This is a slightly intimidating question to broach. It's an enormous question, and I think one could talk about it forever. What makes a great novel? But to pick up on a phrase you just used, that the novel is a form of knowledge. What form of knowledge is the novel? There's the critic Walter Benjamin uses the phrase at some point in his writing that the modern novel is the epic of confusion, and he's contrasting the modern novel with the folktale. That the folktale delivers wisdom that is kind of familiar, but the modern novel exposes confusion, inhabits confusion. And I think that has something to do with it, that the novel is the modern form for experiencing the individual in the confusion of society and in the confusion of its obligations, choices, opportunities, and experiences. So for me, great novels open up that space of confusion, which is also the space of liberty and choice, and realize that it's the experiences interested in language that is that compels one with the sense that this is what life is like, that has that feel of reality. The reality effect is a critical theory phrase that one hears about this. So to come to specifics, maybe I would choose a couple of novels that I love very deeply are D.H. Lawrence's really a pairing of novels, The Rainbow and Women in Love. And they are really invested in the particularity of experience evoked in a very beautiful but also very oral kind of language. So it's both, it has that Shakespearean quality of being the most high flown kind of poetic writing, as well as the most direct speech-like writing. It's writing that has breath and rhythm and tactile immediacy, and it's interested in exploring these characters in societies that are changing, and that particularly in Women in Love, in a society that's really exploding or degenerating as far as D.H. Lawrence is concerned, in a state of entropy, and people are really searching for for a philosophy. They're searching for to make sense of their experience and thereby to work out how they should live, really, in a fundamental way. And Lawrence also appeals because there are lots of writers who are wonderful because they isolate a particular strand of experience, and they write it very thoroughly and in a very pure way. And Kafka, for example, is a genius of this. There's a very particular world, there's a very particular kind of confined set of experiences that are the Kafka experiences. I love Kafka, obviously. I mean, he's a genius, but I also I like and emulated myself, hope to emulate myself, that writing which is open to everything, which is more kind of polyphonic, and it's certainly in Lawrence, it's in Joyce, it's in Dickens, it's in lots of great writing. I think in pop music, it's in the Beatles. You know, that every kind of song, every kind of experience, it's an open and lyrical version of the novel that I'm most interested in.
That's lovely. That's absolutely wonderful to hear. I mean, but you know, I have a lot of questions to ask you once again, but I'm going to move on to the others, and you know, Rodaan, please tell me something about what you think is a great novel.
I will tell you something. The writers, we are all, I think, we feel that we are kind of gods when we are writing book. I make this somebody born, I change his personality, I kill him here, I make him king here, I make him refugees here, I let this girl love this boy. We have kind of power of God. We create the word in the book. These gods, after 50 years, no one read them. Because they are not, we don't need them anymore, because we need new gods all the time. But some of writers, very littles, they are human when they write the book, very human. And they let the person in the book grow up in his way. When you read Anna Karenina, you don't feel Tolstoy. He's just teller. And I know a lot of women in Holland and in Belgium, they read Anna Karenina to understand themselves. This woman in the 19th century, she can't tell them what they are feeling now. Why? Because Tolstoy is not God when he is writing. He is very human. And this makes the book for all the time. And even Tolstoy is not a good writer, but very human, because sometimes he has 50 page, very boring, and then come the diamond, very nice page. But we don't care about this very boring 50 page, because we know that we will arrive to the kind of heaven of knowledge about our soul, about our heart. I think the great novel, the human write it, not the writers, not the gods.
Okay, wonderful. Meelis, what in the, how do you see a really, really good novel, a great novel?
Yeah, I completely agree with Adam here that this is a huge topic. It's a very difficult thing to answer. But I thought about it a bit, and I think that what interests me is different possibilities that a novel offers, because novels, they are all called novels, but they can be really very different and have very different approaches. And I have to admit that only quite recently I read the Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern, and I was really struck by how modern and weird the novel is in its beginning, because this is the period where that novel as a genre began to develop, and it offered many more possibilities to play with. And this means that already in the very beginning, you can have a very interesting ways of making the novel, of writing the novel. And I think that this is one of the things that I'm looking for, to be maybe surprised, or to let myself be surprised by a novel, because it is so that novels have this kind of capacity of just opening something new up, of showing the world from new perspective, and this is that I'm looking for. So it's people who have this ability to look at the world in a different way that I do, or maybe that not I do, but I have used to. So I have a new way of looking at the world. This is something that that interests me, and many of the writers who have done that have already been mentioned. Have talked about Marquez. We have talked about Borges. I would say Kazuo Ishiguro maybe is one of those, and in a way I really also like Iris Murdoch, what she has done. So she's also a wonderful novelist. So it's but. In some sense, I can't say that I can bring out three novelists that are the greatest. So I think there are many more who are greatest in this sense. So
you can't rank. You can't.
To have these kind of different ways of looking at the world, and this variety is important. And in this sense, I also feel that. There is this saying that you should not read many books, but some books thoroughly. I actually don't agree with that. I think that you should read many novels. Maybe some are more worth reading than others, but actually you should read as much as possible.
Sure. So, I mean, what can I say? I mean, I wish this weren't virtual and we could go out and keep talking. But, we have this slot, and actually Kannan said that he'd pass this part of the discussion. But Kannan, would you like to, come in, with your sense of what people look for when they buy books? I mean, when they buy books, I mean, it's very difficult to predict that, but just from, or even to get into a reader's mind, I mean, it's so, how can you say it? But still, I mean, from the patterns of buying that you've actually noticed in your own activity as a publisher, what is it that people, you think, look for? I mean, when a book becomes, when lots of people, not a straight out bestseller, I mean, those are very easy to actually predict. I mean, crime and sex and violence and all those, but a book that becomes an unlikely bestseller, anything that you have, any thoughts on that, Kannan?
Yes. See, I have been a publisher for 25 years now, but I have to say it's very difficult to predict which book will work and which book won't work from our list every year. There are always, disappointments. You think this book will go well, and that may not happen. And there is a complete surprise from another book which you didn't think much about, but that will sort of rise up in the list of books that sell well. So this happens every year. So one has to be very careful about, saying that what are the readers looking for. But what I can say is that, when something that powerfully brings out a new experience, a new culture, that they have not been exposed to. This may be within the same language also, from another part of the world, another community within the same language, or from the world languages. If that world is brought out very powerfully in a way they can identify with it and they can understand that world or the personality or the person or the story or the family. I think those are books that really tend to work well in original writing as well as in translation.
Thanks very much. And we've got 5 questions, so this works perfectly. And I'll call out those 5 questions. And what any of you, please feel free to come in and answer them. I'm not just respond. And we've got about 10 minutes, I think. Yeah. So we've got one question from someone called Parag, and she's asking, do you think that translation leads to erasing parts of a culture because something is bound to be missed in translation? Adam has already actually to some extent responded to that, but anybody else wants to come in? The idea of translations leaving things out, erasing parts of cultures, even to some extent mutilating. I know that, for example, that the Bengali poet Rabindranath Tagore, who wrote so to some extent, it's a lot of the dilemma, of the kind of dilemma that Adam is likely to face if you translate the Epping Forest into Telugu. Because the equivalents are just not available, in the local environment of Andhra Pradesh. And so, the specificity of the details actually just go. They're not there anymore, And so Tagore, for example, translates quite badly, at least the initial attempts to translate his poetry translated quite badly into English. It's not the same thing when you read it in Bangla or when you read it in English, So that's the spirit of the question, if anybody wants to get in.
So if I can respond to that as a
yes, please.
What I feel is, of course, when a work is translated, something might be lost, and sometimes it's also gained in translation. But what often happens is that when we talk of world literature, we are talking mostly about the major languages of the world that have received wide international attention. And there are many more languages, many more writers, many more literature that have not been translated, that have not traveled. Either for 2 reasons, either because they have not received focus. For example, that before Pamuk got Nobel Prize, not so much of Turkish literature was translated. But after Pamuk, there has been a complete flow of Turkish writing into the world. So that could be one reason. For another reason, also because some of those writings of the great writers may not be translatable. You mentioned Tagore, but with what we consider our great poet Subramania Bharati, we know that he can't be translated into even the nearest language, Malayalam. It is almost impossible to get that power out into another language. So he may not figure in the list of great poets of India or the world. But so that is not necessarily true, because he's a great poet, and to understand his poetry, you have to take up the impossible task of learning a new language, which can't be expected from world readers. So these are real difficulties, in marking out what are the great writings of the world. And it is true that in the process, some cultures are left out or partially understood, and sometimes not understood at all.
Yeah.
And this does not happen only with one book or one writer, but also because what is translated, where the world focus lies in that moment. For example, before the Booker Prizes to India, Indian English writing was not so popular in the world. Only after that, it is widely read. So these things have to be taken into account when we decide who are the great writers.
Writers, absolutely. There's one lovely question, and I'll end with that because we've just got 2 minutes to close. It's a lovely question, and it's addressed to everybody, but only one of you has to respond. Whoever is the quickest, please respond. It's very nice. It's a lovely question. With all these great novelists here, my question is for everyone: how do you and when do you come up with the title of your book? And this is a question from, I can't see the name. Oh, it's from Parag. Yeah. At what point do you come up with the title of the book? Do you come up with it, or does the publisher? So, please somebody respond to this. Anybody?
I will answer.
Very nice.
I always have the title of me for me. Then my friends, they said that it's very bad title. And the publisher, he said, you must choose another title. And I find a lot of titles, and then I go back to my own title. This is what I do always.
Okay. 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 That's lovely. Anybody else? I mean, we've got a minute.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, it's quite similar process for me, because when I'm writing, I have this kind of working title, but this working title doesn't have to be the title what the book at the end has. And of course, the publisher has a lot to say what the title should be. I have discussed things with my publisher, and sometimes publishers very insisting of changing the title, but sometimes it's so that they agree, okay, this is a title that they can just publish the book with, because this depends a bit also on this book marketing process. And if I have some strong feelings that the title has to be like that, then I can just say it more strongly to the publisher. But when I don't have any strong feelings, then this title, they can decide at least a bit how the title should be.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, every one of you. And, you know, I enjoyed this, you know, and I'm just very sorry that we can't talk a little more. If this was a physical sort of round table or a panel, we could have gone on. But we have to cut it out, because, you know, I've just got this instruction saying, please close. You know? So that's the last full stop. I mean, you know, and so I will close. But for me personally, I have no words to thank you. I mean, you know, I'm not part of the organizing,
also.
but you know, I enjoyed this very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Adam, Kannan, Meelis, and Rodaan, for this insightful session, which threw up many questions as well as answers. Thank you, Sambudha Sen, for being a fabulous moderator. And a big thank you to all of you for being a wonderfully attentive audience. The session was organized by Cultural Relations Platform, CRP, an EU-funded project in collaboration with Jaipur BookMark. All our sessions will be available to view later on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Once again, we would like to thank all our advisors and partners for generously supporting us. We hope you all enjoyed this conversation and will stay tuned for Kannan Lal Sethia Award for Poetry. Thank you once again. And now we present an interesting reading from the JBM Shorts series.
Friends, India is a land of languages. The large number of languages and dialects make India one of linguistic hotspots in the world. The voices coming out of the subcontinent is not cacophonic but mellifluous symphony. Many of these languages are unwritten and have been passed on from one generation to the next through oral traditions. This process has been going on for thousands of years, and the amount of literature generated in all these languages is staggering and can be mind-blowing to the uninitiated. For the past few editions of the Jaipur Literature Festival, Sahitya Academy has been collaborating with the teamwork in sponsoring one or few sessions, and for this year's virtual edition, we have provided synapses from the 19 Indian languages recognized by the Sahitya Academy. Jaipur Literature Festival and Sahitya Academy's Festival of Letters are the two most prestigious literary festivals of India, and one common thread that unites both of us in our love for literature. It is the same love that one can experience in these festivals, even though they may be expressed in multiple tongues. My best wishes for all success of this year's Jaipur Literature Festival, and I thank Mr. Sanjay Rai and Ms. Namita Gokhale for coordinating with us, and I sincerely hope this love for literature will grow further and our bond and friendship will flourish. Thank you.
Thank you.